My name is Ryan, and I am a previous student at Fitchburg State. I just graduated this year along with my two teammates who are also here in the call. We are the three who are going to be speaking today to tell you about our lovely little game. If you guys want to say hello.
Hello. I'm Jaden.
Hi, I'm Anthony.
Yeah, and we're not the full team, so to speak. We're just like a section of the team, and we're mainly the members who are still actively working on the game up until the point of release. For reasons or other, like the other members of our team have not been able to work presently because, life happens once you get out of school. I'm sure all of you know that. We'll touch on that a little bit more later, but let's tell you about our game, shall we, if you haven't checked it out yet. Before we start, though, we'd like to give a special thanks to Les Nelkin and the Boston Postmortem team for helping us set this up. It's really great that you guys gave us this opportunity to talk about our game and get it a little more public, get a little more eyes on it, because every eye helps. So, I also want to thank everybody in the call who are friends of ours or who are playtesters, anybody who helped us with the initial development to the early months of the game. And beyond that, we really appreciate you guys' support. So thanks a lot. I kind of covered the three of us who are here today to talk to you about the game. But we also have two other official members of the team, and then two of our lovely friends from Berklee College of Music that worked with us during active development while we're still at school. So we one thing Les didn't mention was that we did a collab with Berklee College of Music for sound design, because I don't think we really have like a sound program that's inherent to game design at Fitchburg. But it all works out because the people at Berklee are awesome. I've talked to them plenty of times at Boston social events that I've been to. You guys have probably seen me a couple times at the stroll event that happened not too long ago. That was a great event. And I announced Lobber at one point before when it was like getting into beta while I was there. But now we're here, and the game is out on Steam officially. But enough about the context. What actually is the game? Well, it is, as you can see here, it's kind of a third-person 3D hack and slash with like fully animated 3D models, like the player character, enemy design. You traverse through an endless series of like arenas that you fight in, and it's kind of like an arcade-style high-score chasing game where you kind of just try to go as far as possible. And there's no real like win condition. You kind of just keep playing until you get bored. And that's all it really needs to be, and that's all we kind of designed it to be. It was kind of inspired by similar titles like Nuclear Throne, and has like a sort of gameplay loop that fits that like frantic, high octane, constant threat of death. So not quite a roguelike, but like similar enough to it has a lot of elements like that. It's not meant to be played for a super long amount, like super long play sessions, unless you really like it. Which in that case, like awesome. We think that's something to celebrate. But like Skylanders, Orcs Must Die 3, those were all games we were looking at when we were first looking at inspirations for this concept. The initial pitch was actually not any of our ideas. It was our animator's idea, Mike West, who's not here today, to talk to you about the animations in the game, but they are quite impressive, which was one of the main selling points we had going in when we first made the initial concept. Like that's arguably what made Lobber get chosen, which of the many pitches we were talking to you guys about a second ago, that were announced for Game Studio 2023 capstone. We did use Unity for the game, but obviously that was before we knew about the whole debacle going on currently with Unity, and trust me, we're not happy about it. It really puts a damper on things, especially after we just released and went through the whole hassle that we'll talk to you about soon with getting the game out on a platform. Yeah, we'll show you a little trailer to give you a little taste of gameplay if you haven't already seen it or played it yourself. And this is our trailer on Steam if you haven't been there yet. Yeah, pretty cool. You can see hopefully like the inspirations that we had from the similar titles like Nuclear Throne and just the art style we had chosen for the game and everything. We'll talk to you about that in a second. We'll give you some context as to like the early months of development. But Les already kind of explained this slide here with our capstone program. There were 3 games developed during that period, and Lobber was one of them. But you should definitely, if you get a chance, check out the student projects on itch if they're still there, like Worm Hunt and Plaything. They're great games in their own right. We're just the only game that currently went through with development, which is kind of what we want to talk to you about today. And kind of like near the end of our presentation here, we'll kind of shift and pivot towards that kind of discussion. Sort of taking a student project and taking it from what we initially thought was going to be just a student project to a full release game. But we'll kind of cover like the game itself in its initial stages when we were first developing it. So I'll kind of shift it over to Anthony and Jaden, talk a little bit about like the initial idea we had for the game itself. Anthony, you want to talk about the concept stage?
Yeah. So very early on, we wanted to really get down like the actual theme, and we didn't have like a set camera view, so I worked a lot with different like arenas to like show you like where you are. So I did like a lot of concepts with like actual like stands and arenas, and also just like elevation platforms and everything like that. So there was a long while of back and forth between like me and Ryan, and like actually just testing it in game and like camera to like show stadium, like the arena, but also focus on the gameplay. And we talked a lot about that, and I think we went mostly with like the gameplay and like took the background into like the actual background.
Yeah, we really wanted to focus on creating like really engaging, satisfying combat, which kind of permeated throughout our entire like the 5-person team that initially worked on the game. And we sort of wanted to put an emphasis on creating content that was good for every single member of the team for their portfolio. Because remember, at this point, it was still a student project we were developing this for. It was like nothing more than that, So we each wanted to get something out of the project that we'd be proud of. And so that meant like, like the fact that the game is 3D and has like animated characters instead of like being top-down 2D was a result of like the needs of the people on the team being students and needing to do certain work for their portfolio.
Yes.
So yeah, early development kind of lasted between February and May earlier this year. We've been working on the game for a total of 7 months at this point. And like the game hasn't changed too much since early development, like our initial prototyping when we were first making it up. Like I mentioned before, like our initial design goals were kind of to create like a punchy, satisfying, engaging melee combat experience with some good like player feedback and making it easy to pick up and play, making it pretty accessible to anybody we could. And then I mentioned already giving everybody content for their portfolio and stuff. And this kind of carried over into our initial the mechanics design of the game, which is kind of my forte and what me and Jaden and another member of our team who's also not here today worked on. Jaden, do you want to talk about the core mechanics?
Yeah. So the character you play as is pretty good moveset. You can walk around. You can there's like a basic little 3-hit combo. There's a bottom left corner of the screen there shows the lob mechanic, which is just or we call it chop now. But you can, instead of doing the 3-hit combo, do a slower attack that is a guaranteed kill on one enemy. And if you do it, you get a bunch of super meter. You can use that super meter to throw a head you cut off a skeleton back at them. You can also, there's a dodge roll, and if you hold a special button, you can press all of those other buttons and use the meter to do like bigger, cooler moves. Like the light attack button turns into like a infinitely repeatable spin attack. The dodge roll turns into like a charge forward that lets you hurt people while getting some decent movement. The regular throw turns into like a shotgun throw where you shoot 3 heads out at once, and the special charge chop turns into a massive slam. It's the best move. It's not broken. It's great. It uses the most meter, but it's really fun to use. Very weighty.
Yeah, many design discussions were put into like balancing this moveset and making it as fun as possible. And kind of like it wasn't too long before we came up with like the initial idea of like you have a basic 4-move moveset that you can modify with like a single button, and then like do like special moves that cost some kind of resource. And because like we knew initially that the resource we wanted to do was like the skulls of your enemies, because the initial idea was like you have an axe, you're a goblin, you can cut off skeletons' heads to avoid too much graphic content, no blood or guts or gore or anything. It's bones, and you're beating up undead. But yeah, the initial like core concept was like you can cut off enemies' heads and then throw them around, and that was like the initial pitch of the combat of the game, and that has stayed true the entire time. This kind of carried over as well into our enemy design. I mentioned that you're fighting mostly undead, so like we have like 3 different functional enemies that are in the game, which might be like this much content already for a student project was pretty impressive at the time. Like we tried our best to stay in scope in terms of like content we wanted to add, and we didn't end up actually having too much cut content. In fact, we'll talk to you a little bit later as to like the stuff we were able to add after launch, after beta development. But you have like the basic skeleton that serves as like the horde enemy that you fight most of the time in the game. Sprinkled in with those is usually like a little bomb pest enemy that like has a little hand that scuttles around. It runs away from you until it's ready to explode, in which case it like jumps at you. And then there's the up in the top right corner, there's a like wizard enemy that throws fireballs at you. That is, if any of you have played the game, you know how irritating they are to fight. So that like trifecta of dangerous enemy types forms a really nice gameplay experience that we find that most players have like said creates a really nice difficulty balance throughout the game, and makes combat seem engaging at most times. Yeah, we're really happy with how all the enemies turned out. These are partly in thanks to Mike West, who's, like I said, not here today, but he did all the animations in the game, including the player and the enemies. So just know that all of our animations, wherever you see them, are all done by one person. We do have a slide to show that later, but yeah. Levels were also a big part of it, and Anthony can kind of chip in here and help me explain our level design process. But this is a big emphasis when we were first starting out as well.
Yeah. So when we were first designing levels, we first focused on really, really simple designs. The first level that we officially were going to choose was literally just like a square with like a hole in the middle. And we found after some time that it wasn't like really fun to like actually move around, and it was more like very stationary from gameplay. So Ryan came up with the idea of adding more like an island-based system, which you can see in like the top left there. So me and him went back and forth where he would draw up certain maps, and I would go in with the terrain editor and then test them out and change things, add like little jumps where skeletons can't actually cross, so like that changes a lot of things. And we pretty much went back and forth on that, and then I would put the actual props in and traps. We do have one trap in the game, and then just like a whole bunch of environment polish pretty much after that. But yeah, it was a lot of testing to make sure gaps weren't too small for skeletons to either like fall off, bunch up, and like push each other off too much. So finding a good balance for like the actual size of the level, where it's not like too big, where you're just like running from one end to the other end to like get to an objective, and more of just like free roam where it's actually like designated areas where there's traps and then like pickups and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was a lot that went into level design.
Yeah, it was a fun challenge. I liked doing it. It was fun.
Yeah, we could spend like 10 slides talking about level design. It was a lot of fun. But we are happy to say that we have 6 playable levels in the game, which again, for a student project scope, it was pretty impressive that we were able to get this much content into the game. And the way the game works currently, like you cycle through each of these that are randomly chosen, and it like creates some interesting visual variety in the different like types of environments we have. We have like a desert theme, we have like a grass theme, then we have the crystal theme, like the mine sort of aesthetic. And we've gotten consistently good feedback over the course of development saying like, the game visually looks great even from a distance. Like the game's fun to watch, it's fun to play. And like you can kind of see how all of our initial design goals are kind of coming together. We wanted really good mechanics and like satisfying melee combat, which we accomplished pretty quickly. The game was easy to pick up and play. We had cool enemies to fight, and then we had cool environments to fight them in. So those three things together, that collection of things created for a really good hack and slash game that we were setting out to make. We'll show you a little bit about a slide we had before about the animation in the game. This is sort of like Mike West's process in terms of like creating a lot of the really fluid animations that we have for the player character and for the enemies as well. I had a big hand in this in terms of like implementing the animations and getting them to flow together. I spent a lot of time working on the combo system in the game, because if you have played for a decent amount of time, you probably have realized that you can combo moves together, which is one of the most, I think, appealing parts of the gameplay, where you can, it feels really satisfying to use your moves in tandem to like execute a bunch of enemies at once in some really fluid, like fancy looking combos. So now we get to kind of the turning point in development, which happened around Made in March 2023 at the event Made in MA, which was a showcase at Westport in Boston, or at the Seaport, sorry, in Boston, where I'm sure a couple of you in this call have been to this event, but there's our team right there. We showed up to this event where we had a good chance to get some good playtesting in for the game, and you can see my little snippet of feedback there. Those were kind of our core takeaways from that event. We had a good amount of people sit down and play, and this is the point we kind of realized, like, consistently people were saying the game was fun. And it's one of those things where when you're making a student project, I'm sure a lot of you have realized this. It's like people sit down, they play your game for 5 minutes, they stand up, they say, yeah, that was fun, and then they don't come back and they don't mention it again. It's like, was it really fun? Like, was it really as engaging in the sense of the word as you wanted it to be? In our case, we felt like it definitely was. Like, players were not just sitting down for 5 minutes and then taking off. Players were sitting down, playing our game, asking questions about it, and just like, when you're a designer and you're watching a player playtest your game for 20 minutes at a time, you're like, something's happening here, right? Like, something's going right with our process. And that's when we kind of had this realization that, hey, we could probably like take this game all the way, right? Like, we could publish this. Like, maybe this is a game people actually want in their Steam library, which we're happy to say we got there. But it was a process and a half to go from this point of having a student project that we just initially made with our initial goals of just making a project that students in the class or students on my team could present as a portfolio piece, and nothing too much beyond that. We wanted to make a good game, right? Like, everybody wants to do that, but we didn't really have plans for a full release until about halfway through the project, which is when Made in MA sort of happened. We analyzed that feedback and we sort of realized, like, do we want to take this further? Like, do we want to publish the game? And ultimately we decided on yes. So for the rest of the presentation here, we'll kind of talk to you about what that process was like. And as I mentioned before, kind of the three of us who are in the call with you today, we're the ones who mainly have been working on the project since this point. So since our beta was released sort of around like the time of May of 2023 this year, we've been working the past like 3 months on getting the game released and doing a bunch of post-beta polish that we felt like needed to be incorporated. Jaden, do you want to talk about the Steam prep we had to do?
Yes. So the Steam process took a little while. Although I think for the most part, the Steam process wasn't that bad. It's mostly just a lot of like prep work, make sure this thing is in this box, make sure everything's all set and ready to go. It's like when something's good, waiting on Steam to approve it before it goes live, and so on and so forth. I know for me, I mean, do you want me to talk more broadly in terms of like?
It's up to you. It's up to you.
Okay. I was gonna say, I know one thing for me that was like big on getting the Steam version to release was I have a Steam Deck and I really like it. And I really wanted to make sure that the game could run well on the Steam Deck before we released it, because I want to get it verified eventually. But one of the big things that I wanted as a result of that was a like full PC graphics options menu, which I hadn't done before, and that took a lot more time than I expected. And it was a lot of working on little tiny code heavy things that don't relate to the game itself, which is an interesting change of pace.
Yeah, that's one of the changes we're kind of alluding to. It's like once we shifted from student project to the Steam release, there's just so many things that you realize over the course of continued development that you need for your game to be like Steam ready, or for it to, in other words, for it to be like a releasable product, like to be a game that like you think to yourself, if I were to release this right now and I were to buy it off of Steam, what are the things that this game would need for it to convince me it's a complete game? And like that list gets quickly longer and longer the more you think about it. Because, like settings menu, quality, polish, visual optimization, performance, controller settings, accessibility options. The list goes on and on. As for things that you wouldn't think of when you're first making a student project, the stuff that's just like not that important. Yeah, functional save files. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff. Marketing is another big one that we'll talk about in a bit, that we didn't anticipate being a task in itself, but it definitely is. So we'll kind of go in depth a little bit about the stuff that we've been working on the past couple months, sort of along the lines of like all that extra stuff I just mentioned, in terms of like extra stuff you would not think about until you get to it, in terms of like getting the game up to that standard for release. A big part of it was bug fixing. Obviously, like any project has to do that, but the amount of bug fixing that you don't anticipate with every single thing is like, astronomical. And Jaden and I can attest to that. We probably spent more time bug fixing than we did actually doing like development.
Attack snapping.
Yeah. Me for the stuff that I was doing a lot of the time, I was in charge of like the game's balance and the game systems. So I was focusing a lot on difficulty balancing, which you can see my little spreadsheet there of just like what I'd be constantly referring to and like implementing through formulas and stuff in the game's code to ensure that the balance of enemy spawns and like, making sure the difficulty of the game was at a good spot. And from what feedback we've gotten, it's been pretty good in terms of like the pacing of the difficulty and making sure the game isn't too easy but not too hard. That's definitely important for replayability and improving the overall experience, which is like a lot of the kind of stuff that we're highlighting in this slide here, including objective clarity, which is something that we didn't anticipate until we ended up doing a little more playtesting. And what we mean by that is just like making sure that the objective of the game is clear to the player. And so like, in one case, there's a certain objective in the game where you have to kill like certain enemies and get their these like little crystals they drop. And you have to drop them off at a cart. And as you can see, we had to spell all that out because in our continued playtesting, we realized that consistently enough, players were not being able to figure out what to do without that text right there. So previously, we didn't have that text that like tells you step by step what you're supposed to do in the top right corner of the screen. But over time, we realized like we might as well add it and then just remove it once the player's done it, once they understand what to do in that task. Because it's not that people are stupid, it's just that you don't anticipate the things that they will notice and not notice. So definitely emphasis on playtesting being important in this case. As well as any additional content we added. There were only a couple of big features we were able to add with the limited time we had, aside from all the other stuff that I mentioned in this slide, which is like, balancing, bug fixing, clarity, and other stuff like that. We did add a whole other mode to the game, which is if any of you haven't unlocked it yet, I give you my congratulations. I'm already impressed, but hopefully enough of you guys will unlock it in time if you continue to play the game, which I hope you unlock it, and hopefully you get to check it out because it's a pretty interesting game mode. And then Jaden added the fully implemented our settings menu, which is a task in itself, and I'm sure he can tell you more about that if he wants to.
Yeah, making a settings menu is a lot of fiddling with little bits in Unity that are like really specific. We had a couple people from playtesting say that like the game would keep its resolution well, like in between, not even just like play sessions, but whenever you switch levels. There was when we launched, there was a bug in the game where by default the game would put itself on low graphics quality, which was awful. And that was just because I missed one checkbox in the Unity settings, and I pushed a hotfix the day after the game came out to fix that and a couple other little things.
Make sure you double check stuff, guys.
Yeah. But yeah, it was towards the end of development. It was a lot of like, oh, we have a screen shake in the game. We should have the ability to turn that down so that if anyone finds it annoying, they can kind of adjust it a little bit. Rumbles in the game, but that also might be annoying, or might. Yeah, it would just be annoying for some people. So have the ability to toggle that. I think the button UI in the game is nice, but it can get in the way of the action a little bit sometimes. So an option to toggle that as well. Sound settings, all that stuff. It's a lot of little things about the gameplay experience.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure, like, we wanted to be thorough in making sure anything we changed in the game was benefiting the player's experience. And like any decision we made, we just wanted to make sure, like, will this improve the game for players, or won't it? You know, and will it hamper the fun factor at all? Because the fun factor is definitely something we wanted to preserve, which was part of my philosophy going forward when I was leading the design team for the game after our beta, which is kind of like, you know, fun comes first. Like, the fun factor of the game, it should take priority. Like, lean into the fun of your game. Don't focus too much on the negatives. They're important, but what you should focus on is like what makes your game fun, what keeps players coming back, and that's kind of like the focus of the behind the under the hood changes we ended up making during the last few months. Along with that is kind of we already kind of alluded to a lot of it, but the big three things that really helped make our game feel polished and play polished and feel satisfying to play. That initial goal we had was haptic feedback, screen shake, and attack snapping. They're just making sure you can hit the things you want and making sure when you hit stuff, it feels good to hit them. And we think we achieved that with these three things. Even though most of them have settings that you can turn down, which I'm kind of upset about. Because if you turn down screen shake in a game, I think something's wrong with you. But that's just me. Really, the big three things here that should be here instead of snapping in not like if our game wasn't our game would be sound. Sound effects are one of the things that I assure you will add a ton to your game if you don't have them yet. Especially when you're working on student projects, you may not think sound's that important, but it adds a ton to your game. And you know, when you combine it with like particle effects and screen shake and haptic feedback and everything like rumble, it can really help to improve the gameplay experience, and it makes a noticeable difference almost every time. Yeah, so Anthony and I can talk to you a little bit about the visual polish of the game, which is like the real stuff that people tend to notice when they're looking at like, you know, screenshots and videos and just like, you know, playing the game for the first time. This is stuff they pick up on that is pretty apparent. The game looks a lot better than it did at beta in terms of like the UI, which we did complete overhaul on in the past few months. Anthony and I worked together on particle effects, and I did a lot of work on visual indication as to like, you know, telegraphing enemy attacks and just representing different AoEs and like making the player clarity, like I talked about before, a little bit more clear. Anthony, do you want to talk about like the props and stuff?
Yeah. So like props added after? Or...
Yeah, just stuff we worked on in the past few months.
Yeah. So After classes ended, most of the levels were kind of complete. Not complete, but they. How do I explain this? I guess there wasn't much to really add for gameplay field. So we decided to add. You can see it in the close left picture in the top right corner of it. There's a little slushy machine. So we wanted to have a way for the player to actually get health back through a pickup. So for that we needed a model. So created that. I worked on some actual environmental just little nature pieces like a tree. Trees were added. Something that actually helped a lot was on the edges of every arena, it was all just flat, and it just went straight down into a void that it wasn't really appealing to look at. There was nothing really there. So for each of the scenes, I kind of added its own little object. So I added little vines that go off the side, and I did pretty much just revamped every level to just make it feel more alive. I redid some of the what was it? The fire particles for the braziers, and I think the torches as well.
Yeah.
Some work on the bridges, and I think that's it for that. Yeah.
Yeah, overall the game looks a lot better. It plays a lot better. It sounds a lot better than it did a few months ago, and we're pretty happy with how the game looks, feels, and plays right now. We hope you will be too if you end up trying it. So to kind of emphasize the UI that we changed, we ended up commissioning our friend Allura, who you can check out on Twitter. She's an excellent artist. I definitely recommend checking out her work. But she was nice enough to help us out in creating some new UI icons for the updated UI in the game. You can kind of see the comparisons here as to the old stuff we used to have, kind of placeholder things that we had on the screen, and then updating it to the current UI, which looks a lot nicer, a lot cleaner, and gets the idea across in a similar way. I also worked on a lot of UI effects, so just having the health bar flash, having the there's a new combo. There's a combo tracker in the game, so when you get 10 or so kills, it shows a number in the top left that gives you a sense of how many what's your current streak, I guess, in terms of how many kills you've gotten in a row. It just adds to the dopamine hits of seeing a number go up and seeing your score sort of increase. And all those things together created a really nice new UI for the game that we think looks a lot better than it did before. We didn't have a dedicated UI artist for the game, which is one thing that we mentioned in a previous postmortem that we definitely could have improved upon. Having someone who could take up that amount of, because UI is a ton of work. If anybody does in here does UI, it's its own art, and it's a whole other section, a whole other department of the game that I definitely recommend having one or two people work on, solely work on UI, because there's so much that goes into it. But moving on, we can kind of wrap things up a little bit here with our kind of reflection about what went right, what went wrong with the project. We've kind of covered it a little bit throughout the entire presentation. But the stuff that went right, I mentioned it before, we have really engaging combat. The game it's a really fun beat 'em up that you can kind of just pick up and play for 15 minutes at a time, which is all it needs to be, and that's all we wanted it to be. And we definitely succeeded on that front. We accomplished our design goals. We wanted the game to be satisfying to play, feel really punchy and look nice, and just offer a really replayable, satisfying experience. We made the most of our limited resources, and what I mean by that is there were only 3 of us out of our 5-person team with our limited skill sets. I'm sort of a generalist designer, so I can handle most things in the project, but that's still a ton of work that I need to do to cover sound design and UI, performance, balancing, gameplay, stuff like that. And Anthony's primarily a visual effects designer, an environment artist, and we really didn't have the manpower to do everything we wanted to do past beta. But we made the most out of the manpower we had available, which was basically just the 3 of us. So we think we did a pretty bang up job at making the game feel polished and play well, with the people we had. Stuff we could have done better. You've already heard us talk about it, the importance of playtesting. We did not playtest enough, in my opinion. We did not get enough feedback in terms of the stuff we were doing the last couple of months. There was just a lot of issues that we discovered after the fact that we had people test it. And it's just like, test. Like, that needs to be hammered home in any aspiring designer, in my opinion. It's just like, it's so important. Like, take after Valve and their philosophies around playtesting. Playtesting is what you do anytime you want to implement something new. And I just want to hammer that home. We definitely could have done more testing. Resource management in terms of, like I mentioned before, that we did well with the things we had with the people we did have on the team, but we could have done more in terms of, we were out of school at this point. Like, we could have definitely taken on more help. We could have reached out to people, asked for more resources to help us out with getting the game finished, and we just didn't, for one reason or another. But definitely, like, don't be afraid to ask for help from people you know. That's the importance of connections, guys. And just, getting more hands on the project is never a bad thing, unless you're not managing it correctly, obviously. But we definitely could have reached out more and saved ourselves a lot of time in terms of playtesting. We could have had a dedicated playtest group that we just never had like the time to set up correctly. We could have done a lot more with marketing, which is kind of the last section here on the slide. It's like, we really didn't have the experience or the manpower to market our game correctly. So we really don't have a lot of eyes on the game as a result, which that's why we'd be really appreciative if you guys would like help us out in that front. Like, tell your friends about the game, recommend it, leave a review on Steam. That would mean a lot to us, because it really does help us to get eyes on the game. We're not planning on it doing like amazingly well on the market, especially with the current changes with Unity. That makes us especially cautious, but and it's really unfortunate we just released, a week before they put out the announcement. But it is what it is, and we still want the game to do well. We still want to make some amount of profit, get some kind of compensation for our efforts. We worked 7 months on this project, and we're really happy with how it turned out. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of that. And the game is out on Steam now. Please play it, leave a review. It's only $5. And I believe you can still download the beta if you want to of it for free. Is that right, Jaden?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Join our newsletter if you want to, and we'll update you on any like hot fixes that come in the future, because like it probably will need one or two more. And we'll let you know that like Lobber is not completely off the radar for us in terms of continued development in the future, like post-launch. We talked about it a little bit, but like we would be open to the possibility of working on the game again. That's just something to keep in mind. But that's kind of it from us, guys. Hopefully you deemed some useful information about Steam release and just like taking a student project and running with it. That's kind of what we wanted to emphasize to you, that it is possible. And don't be afraid to just go for it. Like there's plenty of hurdles, as you can see, that happen along the way. But it's a worthwhile process. Companies love to see it. We love to see it, obviously. It's awesome to see your game on Steam, to see like, we just saw Moist Critical the other day on his like bad game stream, like scroll past the game on Steam, and I was like, oh, there it is. See it? It's on the page. So that's always cool. And we'll turn it over to questions now, if that's it.